Hi there, welcome to this class where I'm going to show you how I use stamping and embossing to make this pretty layout. So here's my sketch. I know that I want to do my stamping and embossing so that it takes your eye from the title at the top to the picture at the bottom. I'm taking part in the Simon Says Stamp and Show Challenge with this layout, and the theme this week is Kraft, and I'm also using, as well as the craft paper, some of this lovely bow bunny paper which is from one of their new collections, Anthem. I really like this. Look at this gorgeous wood grain effect paper. I love that blue. It's like almost like a violet blue. It's really lovely, and of course my nice bit of craft paper which goes well with it. This is the set of stamps that I'll be using. Well, in fact, I'm only using 2 of the daisies to decorate my layout, and this set is by Creative Expressions and it's called Botanicals. This is the photograph that I'll be using on my layout, and it's of me and my husband all dressed up and dancing the night away, looking quite a lot slimmer in those days, and those are the days when we could stay up till 5 o'clock in the morning to eat our breakfast as the sun came up. So you want to trim the craft paper to an 11.5-inch square, and if you, like me, don't really like to waste papers that you're using to frame a layout, I'm going to gut the centre of this piece. So I'm leaving a 1-inch border so that I can attach it round the craft paper once I've finished, and I get to save all that yummy paper for something else. And then I'm taking the back of my scissors and I'm just distressing the edges of my frame. And it's quite nice because this bow bunny paper's got a white core, it adds a white highlight around the edge of the frame. I'm also lightly distressing the edges of the craft paper. It's more to add texture than to add any kind of border, because I'm going to use my white distress paint, and I'm using it a bit like a dry brush, so I'm not getting too much paint on the applicator and just adding a light brushed white frame to my craft paper. So to work out the area in which I'm going to stamp, I had to think about my title first, which is a little bit unusual for me. So I've come up with Dancing in the Moonlight, and I've used my Cricut Opposites Attract. I don't have many Cricut cartridges, but this one's very useful because it's got a couple of different fonts on it, and I've used both of them to create my title, Dancing in the Moonlight. And then just roughly laying out my title and the place where my picture's going to sit, I'm just sketching lightly with a pencil where I want to stamp on my layout. Because I'm going to be embossing on this, I'm going to get rid of the majority of the line just so I've got a trace of the area in which I want to create my stamped interest, and then I'm going to sprinkle with my embossing powders, thinking of just creating a dusting of embossing powders along that trail where the rest of my layout's going to sit. So I'm using a Personal Impressions Pearl Violet, a Create and Craft Glacier White embossing powder, and a Stampendous Kaleidoscope. So I've been raiding my stash to put these few bits together. Because this is all loose on my layout and there's no sticky inks involved, you heat your paper, your craft paper from underneath. Just be a little bit careful. One, that you don't disturb the powder and move it to an area that you didn't want, and 2, that you don't go too close to your paper and singe your embossing powders. So I've started to get my trail, and you will find that your paper buckles a little bit, and I would suggest you do this in stages so you don't build up too much of a clump. I'm trying to keep it nice and light, a little bit misty. So to stamp my daisies along my trail of embossing powder, I'm using the medium and the small daisy from my botanical stamp set by Creative Expressions, and I'm using a Brilliance pigment ink which is Moonlight White, and then I'm embossing in the Create and Craft Glacier White. So I'm just randomly stamping along that trail of embossing powder some of the medium and some of the small daisies. Beauty of this is if you get any random stray particles of embossing powder, it doesn't matter, which makes a nice change for me. Next I'm going to frame my photograph. As I said earlier, the photograph is 4.5 inches square, and I'm going to frame it with a fine frame of blue. So I'm cutting 4 5/8 inch square from the Anthem Legacy, and I'm going to be using the dark blue side. And then I'm cutting from the same paper as the frame, which is Anthem Majesty. I'm cutting a 5-inch square, and that gives a slightly wider frame, and then 5 1/8 of an inch to go back to the fine frame, and again in the blue, which is the Anthem Legacy. Once I'm happy with my sizing, then it's get out the scissors and the paint. So on my photograph, I don't really want to use sandpaper on it, so I'm just giving it a light dusting as I did before on the craft paper with my distress paint, which is Picket Fence. So layer everything up with double-sided tape, and as you add each layer of the paper frame, then just take your scissors and distress lightly all the way around the edges of the paper. And for the final layer, so as I put my photograph in position, I decide that I think I need a little bit more interest in this corner opposite the title. And following the same steps as we did creating all the daisy embossing earlier, I'm just creating a little area of interest in this top right hand corner of the layout. And I think that looks a lot better, and it actually points to the title, so that's quite a nice effect. So I'm using the letters that I've cut out earlier, and I'm sticking them into position on my layout. I quite like the effect of these two different fonts when you're making a title. It's quite a nice effect. I'm just using my acrylic block to keep everything in line. With double-sided tape, I'm going to be attaching the Kraft centre of my layout to its frame, and I'm using a strong double-sided tape to do this, and this will help make sure that everything's nice and flat after using the heat gun on the layout. And another tip is to not remove all of the backing tape off your double-sided tape in one go. And you can see I'm just releasing a few little tabs. Then I can hover over my layout without everything catching down. When you're using the full 12 by 12, this is quite a handy tip. And then once I'm happy I've centered everything up, then I can pull those backing tapes away. So our next job is to create a whole host of pretty daisies with our pattern paper. So if you're stamping on the light pattern paper, I'm going to be using my Perfect Medium and the Pearl Violet embossing powder. And when I'm stamping on the darker paper, I'm going to be using the Perfect Medium and the Glacier White. So I just want a selection of daisies on the two different kinds of pattern papers, and I want to have both the medium and the small daisies. And now it's time to take your scissors and cut all those embossed daisies out, ready to start forming a nice spray of daisies down your embossed daisy trail. I didn't know it at the time when I was cutting all these daisies out, but I've ended up using 10 of the large daisies and 15 of the small daisies, just to give you a guide on how many flowers to stamp and emboss and then cut out. So you can tell by the lighting change some time has passed, and what I forgot to do was turn the video recorder back on, so I've missed one stage, and that was the fact that I rubbed over this blue paper with my Perfect Medium ink pad, and then I embossed using the Kaleidoscope embossing powder. And it was that paper, once it had been embossed, that I took away and cut out using this Marianne's Creatable die. And this die's number is LR0150, and then I took my embossed pieces of paper away and I cut out a selection of leaves. Before I start to stick all the flora and fauna into place on the layout, I'm going to show you how to turn your photograph into a pocket. And I want to create a little bit of lift so we can easily tuck a pocket for journaling and an extra photograph underneath this main photograph on the layout. So I've got some strips of chipboard that measure 1/4 of an inch wide, and then I'm creating a U shape. Just make sure you've worked out which side the opening of your pocket is going to be. In this case, it's going to be on the right hand side of the photograph as you look at it on your layout. And then once you've got that U shape, you can stick your photograph into place. Just leave enough room on that right hand edge because we're going to have a little bit of a shaped tag poking out on that right hand edge. And now we're ready for the fun stuff of laying out all the flowers and sticking them into position on the layout. Another job that I thought is best to do all in one go before you stick the flowers down is to shape all the flowers, and I'm just using a bit of foam and an embossing tool to press in the centre of the flowers to lift the petals, and then on the larger flowers just curving those petals back a little bit. So some of the flowers are stuck down with foam pads and some of them are stuck down with glue, and I'm just cutting little bits of foliage as I go, and really it's just a case of making a pleasing arrangement against the stamped daisies that you already have on your layout. I'm embellishing with some gems. I've got some pearls and some gemstones, and I'm just adding little touches of those to the layout as well. I've got some teeny tiny ones that I'm just putting down here in blue and white, and then just tucking in little bits of that foliage as I work my way around the layout. So there we have a nice trail of daisies going from your title and down and wrapping around your photograph pocket at the bottom of your layout. Looking at the history paper that comes with this collection, and it's got the perfect tag, and as you can see here I've cut it out ready to make a tag to tuck into the pocket on my layout, and I've also framed up a picture of me and hubby all dressed up. It was the official photograph taken by the photographer at the summer ball, and this photograph was taken in Cyprus many moons ago. I reckon it was about 1990. And the pretty dress that I'm wearing on this photograph is now hanging in my attic waiting for that one-day diet. One day I'll diet and get back into it. So now I'm going to create a little pull for the tag. So the tag's got plenty of space for journaling and an extra photograph. And now for the pull, I'm going to use another one of my pretty flowers and a bow bunny brad that came with the collection. Using the pin flare glue gel or silicone glue to hold this in place means I don't have to put the legs of the brad through the layout, but it's still quite sturdy once it's dry on the tag. And for that final finishing touch of moonlight sparkle, just take some Ranger's glossy accents and trace over the fine letters in the title and sprinkle with dry glitter, which is clear rock candy. I like this glitter because it's a little bit more subtle than some of the sparkly iridescent glitters, and it's almost got a look of sugar, and that's quite nice in this kind of context. So I'm just sprinkling it on and tapping off the excess and adding a little bit to the flower pull on the tag. And then I think that pull just needs a tiny pearl adding to the centre. A big thank you from me to everyone over at the Simon Says Stampin' Show Challenge for this week's theme of Kraft. I've had a lovely time sprinkling my embossing powders all over my layout. I really like the look of it and I may well do it again. It's not something I normally do. I hope you like this enough to give it a go yourself. Thank you for watching.